All right, everyone. Today we are talking about stress, occupational stress specifically. So the stress across the board is a matter of human life, but we're going to try to talk about it within the context of the organization. So this is how managers deal with their own stress, how they deal with stress from their groups and teams, their employees, right? And the idea is not to have no stress. A little bit of stress is actually really helpful, but overwhelming stress leading to persistent stress leading to burnout is what we're kind of trying to avoid as much as possible. So it's going to be pretty short. There's only a few kind of major things I want you to know, but specifically the gas models, which we'll look at here in just a minute. A few things to know. Stress is A, inevitable, B, and it varies by the individual. Some people, when you hang out with them, they're like, oh my word, they seem constantly stressed out, right? But that's actually their what you call a homeostasis level. They're functioning adaptively and they're functioning just fine. If that kind of stress was on you, it might be a disaster, or vice versa. If the stress that you have is on them, it might be a disaster. But there are individual bandwidths to how much stress, and more particularly, because what you'll see is not the stress, but the coping with it. How people cope with stress just varies by the individual. General adaptation syndrome. Here's kind of the big idea. 3 stages. Number 1, alarm. Something happens, right? Your brain starts firing, releasing all kinds of biochemical coping mechanisms, flooding your body. That's normal, right? That's okay. If you see a cougar following you, it's okay to be afraid, adrenaline jacked, ready to fight or flight. If you're afraid you're going to get laid off or something like that kind of stuff is normal. But when it continues, you next come to resistance. There's continued stress over and over and over. Your body was made to and your mind was made to pop like that from time to time, right? And ensure survival of the species. But if it's constantly like that, ultimately it leads to what we call exhaustion. Those mechanisms are like the switch was opened and that valve is not closing. Ultimately, that's what's going to lead to burnout, as well as other psychological disorders. So we talk about depression, stress, and anxiety. Those 3 tend to go together. And there are some natural solutions in the workplace that we can do for some of those things. Keep in mind that we have individuals who are working at a company who also have families and bills and cars and kids, and they get in a fight with their teenager or a fight with their husband or whatever it is. That stuff doesn't just stay out there. That stuff comes in here. So while we can't control what happens stressing out our employees outside, we do whatever we can inside to get an optimal level of stress. Again, not no stress, but an optimal level of stress. And then try to equip them with coping mechanisms to deal with what's called extra-organizational or outside the organizational stress. There are a lot of sources. There's individual level, group level, and then macro level inside the organization. At a group level, lack of group cohesion. It's not a team that you want to be a part of. There are personality problems. There's infighting, politics, and they're on the losing end, whatever it is. Individual stressors, some people are just wired to be more stressful, and then sometimes the job will do that. There's a thing called role conflict and role ambiguity. Both of those are bad. Role ambiguity for your new employees is probably one of the most important things to focus in. So what I used to do is I'd manage people who come in 1 to 3 years, 1 to 5 years. I just say, hey, what is your job here and how does it fit in? And they'd be like, Avey, you freaking hired me. You tell me my job. I was like, no. Like, this is not a test. There's no grades. I want you to tell me, what is your job? What are you supposed to get done? Like, explain what success looks to me. Explain what success looks like to me. And the more they can do it and do it clearly and describe, like, this is what I'm supposed to be accomplishing. This is what success looks like. And here's how it fits in. Here's how each of our successes fit into organizational strategy. A big chunk of your work is done at that point. Role ambiguity, They don't know what's expected of them, and there's consequences. There's a fear of failure as well. Role conflict, conflicting expectations. This happens more so in matrix organizations where you have you're reporting to 2 or 3 different people, and they're expecting different things from you. Like to avoid that wherever possible. Sometimes you can't avoid it, but avoid it wherever possible. And like I said, some of it is just individual. There's this idea of a type A and type B person. There's some science to it. Type A personalities are great. They get a lot done. And a lot of times they're like a bull in a china shop and breaking stuff, including themselves, anger, hostility, and ultimately burnout. Type A is the person who works really hard, gets a lot done, dies of a heart attack at 45 years old in a fit of rage over a missed deadline. But we have all types inside of our organization, and we got to manage all types. I talked about this a little bit I was going to bring it up, it's fine, on chapter 7, this idea of learned helplessness. This is when someone believes the environment is affecting me. It has to do with what's called locus of control. And I have no control over what happens. It's a source of stress, but ultimately over time it leads to learned helplessness, which means people don't act out on their environment. They don't try to change anything. They don't try to work harder, whatever it is, because they don't think that they can affect anything. At that point, they have what's called an external locus of control, meaning the environment affects me, I don't affect it. In reality, it's both 100% internal, 100% external locus of control. So not a good idea. Like, you're not God. 100% internal locus of control. You're completely sovereign and you affect everything else and nothing affects you. It's garbage. But so is the flip side, that you don't affect anything. So these are probably dialogues, right, with your employees. And when you sniff this out, like they just kind of feel helpless, that's where we start doing some of the hope interventions from chapter 7 of kind of pathways and agency thinking. But again, a source of stress. I think we know this. I said it before, but some stress is good. And if there's a tight deadline and a lot of work to do, it's okay. Like from time to time, I'll hang out with my seniors who are graduating, going off and getting jobs, and they're like, "Oh my gosh, I'm so stressed out. This is not good for me." I'm like, "Shut up. Yes, it is. It's okay to be stressed out for a season, right? So you have stressful moments, you have stressful seasons. That's all right. But when stress leads to burnout and you have physiological and psychological consequences of it, besides I'm having trouble sleeping because I have a big job interview tomorrow, there's nothing wrong with you. You're not broken. That's okay. Some levels of stress, mild levels of stress, are just fine. But again, has to do with degree, so kind of magnitude, and has to do with how long that person is in that kind of dopamine phase of tons of stress. Okay, physical health, we know this, psychological problems, behavior problems. So this is just for us to look as managers and go, am I seeing any of these things in my employees? And is there something I can do about it? Like as a manager, is it a job design issue? Is it a style issue? Is my managerial style not working for them? Is this the right place for them? And I don't mean fire a stressed out employee. What I mean is try to figure out, is there things we can buffer around them to get them back to where they ought to be. Last thing, individual. I'll just throw this out. It's been discouraging a little bit, kind of post-COVID, watching different kind of psychosocial mechanisms. One of them that stands out is loneliness, and the other one is a lot of people had activities that they would do with other people, outside activities, and those have stopped. It's very rare to meet a burnt out, stressed out person who A, exercises, and B, has good friends. I know that sounds like oversimplifying, and this is not in every case, and people are going to go, oh, that's not fair. No, I'm not saying it's every case. But what I'm saying is, on average, humans tend to thrive in intimate, meaningful relationships with other humans. And they also tend to thrive more when they're doing things, like physical things, right? So if someone is an accountant and they're lonely, that person is much more likely to deal with stress, depression, and anxiety than someone who is a home builder or a concrete worker who's working with their same crew of friends 5-6 days a week. So my encouragement, not just to you, but to you as a manager to look and go, are people integrated here, right? Or do people have meaningful relationships at work? The more we can create that environment, the better. We'll talk about it a little bit more in one of the next chapters coming up. The more we can create that environment, the better, and also environment for physical movement. Both of those things are very helpful in dealing with stress. Okay, that's it for stress. I hope it didn't stress you out.